The BSides NoVA 2020 stream will begin momentarily.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, great. All right, we're going to get started here. Oh, wait. Clicker? 1 second, just kidding. I don't see one. Okay, while they're doing that, I'm just going to get started. So hi, I'm Nikki Robinson. I'm here to talk about vulnerability chaining, mostly as it relates to vulnerability management and from the remediation side of things. Yep. We're going to test this out here. See if I can figure this out. Okay, great. All right, so, yep, I'm Nikki. So the reason I got really interested in this topic, I started my doctorate a couple years ago because I was really interested in how low and medium vulnerabilities could be used together to create a more severe attack. So I come from the IT world. I did Citrix for a number of years, managing virtual desktops, XenApp servers, presentation farm 4.5 from many, many, many years ago. So anyway, so I was managing virtual desktops, I'm managing servers, and the security team is like, all right, we gotta fix criticals and highs. Okay, great. Well, so I started doing some research into some medium vulnerabilities, and I was like, hey, there's some, some easy wins here. We can apply some reg keys, we can change some group policies, and really lower the amount of mediums that we have in our environment. They were like, we don't have time for that. Just focus on the criticals and highs. I was like, okay, well that seems like kind of a problem. So anyway, so I got interested in vulnerability chaining, and then how do we kind of work on that when we're thinking about remediating vulnerabilities and prioritization. Okay, so what's vulnerability management? Seems like, it's pretty easy, right? It is not patch management. It's a component of it. I got kind of tired of people coming up to me and saying like, oh, well, yeah, we're applying patches, we're doing vulnerability management. I'm like, that is not a mature vulnerability management program. That's like step one. We got step one done, that's great. Okay, what about everything else? We need to talk about secure configuration. What do our group policies look like? All of those different components go into vulnerability management. It's not just applying a patch. And I'm going to talk as we go through the slides about Spectre Meltdown. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because it has many of those components. It's not just a patch. There's also registry keys, drivers, all of those things. So we need to identify our vulnerabilities. This is a challenge, mostly because some of their hosts, maybe our servers, we can't see them, we don't know about them, so maybe we're not even finding them. That definitely adds complexity when we're trying to resolve vulnerabilities. We need to classify them. So are we just looking at vulnerability scoring? How mature is our vulnerability program? Are we actually looking at how are they exploitable? All of those other factors. And then of course remediation. Are we actually remediating them effectively? Did we apply the patch and our IT guy said, yeah, we applied the patch, it's good to go. And then you go and scan and you're like, you didn't actually apply the patch. I've had many times where the IT guy comes in and says, okay, I applied the patch, run your scan again, we're good to go. I run the scan and I'm like, well, actually, your file version is still saying that you didn't apply the patch. And he's like, well, yeah, I tried to apply the patch and it said it wasn't applicable. Like, well, then you didn't apply the patch. It wasn't the right patch. And then mitigate. So we need to make sure we have an accurate discovery of all of our vulnerabilities, because if we don't, how are we going to actually remediate them effectively? If we don't know what we're remediating, then we could be looking in the wrong direction and not actually doing what we're supposed to be doing. How to prioritize. So this is a big deal. If you're in the government space, you have to prioritize criticals and highs. Maybe you have reporting requirements. Maybe you have things that you have to worry about specifically for criticals and highs. So that could be part of your prioritization effort. Systems affected versus impact. That's definitely an important part when we're talking about maturity of the vulnerability program. You might have 4,000 systems affected, but is the vulnerability exploitable? Is it easy to fix? Is it difficult? Could it break our systems? So all of those things have to be thought about when we're looking at vulnerability management. And a continuous monitoring program. I know I see it all the time where people think that we've remediated a vulnerability, we've got this fixed, and then I run a scan again and then it's showing up again. Well, because the baseline wasn't patched. So maybe they rolled out 100 desktops that aren't patched, and here we go, we've got 100 new vulnerabilities that should have been patched already. Okay, so scoring metrics. So again, when we're talking about maturity, we're looking at a CVS score. That gives us a good idea of kind of how important that vulnerability is, but that's not the only thing. It's meant to kind of give you an initial score to help you figure out how to remediate that vulnerability. Not just a score, how valuable is the asset? So let's say I've got one server and it is super critical to my business. Hopefully you have two. Hopefully you have a high availability, but there are plenty of places that maybe only have one. So how valuable is that asset? Am I going to leave a critical vulnerability on this one asset and fix these 200 other workstations? Maybe I'm going to focus on the server first and make sure that's fixed first before I focus on my workstations. What is the likelihood? Are they really going to attack us using this one vulnerability? Or might they use this exploitable vulnerability that's a medium or low before they would use this critical? And who's targeting us? I'm going to talk a little bit more as we go through about threat intel and how it can really help to mature a vulnerability management program. So heat maps. There are a lot of great tools out there that don't just do vulnerability scoring, but they also provide like dashboards so you can actually see, you can input, hey, these are my valuable assets, these are the most critical things to me, and that'll help you figure out and prioritize which vulnerabilities you should fix first. Because at the end of the day, we can't fix everything. We can try, but with so many patches and vulnerabilities released all the time, we just kind of have to pick what's most critical and fix those first. And too much information. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit as we go through about additional complexity when it comes to remediating vulnerabilities, especially if you have a ton of different products in your environment. You've got, let's say, 5 different versions of Windows Server OS. Well, you have to apply patches for each one of those levels of OS. If you only have one, that makes things a lot more simple. Okay, so typical patch management, like I mentioned, remediation deadlines. You might have 30 days for critical, 60 for medium, 90 for low, depending on what you're, if you have federal regulations or you have something else that you're looking at. And then it's going to depend on your small business versus large organizations. If you have a one-person IT shop, patch management is going to look a lot different than if you have a team of 30. So it's really about prioritizing what's most important first. So of course, in a lot of places, criticals and highs first. So why aren't we looking at mediums and lows? Why aren't we looking at how they could be used together to create a critical attack? You could take 2 or 3 mediums or 2 or 3 lows and mediums, put them together and create a critical attack. And of course, end-of-life legacy. I've actually heard a couple of presenters talk about it today. It's a problem, or else we wouldn't be talking about it. There's plenty of end-of-life legacy applications out there that people still need. I see Java 6 all the time, and it kills me. But people need it, because they can't upgrade or they won't upgrade. So how do we fix those things if we can't remediate Java 6? Do we segment it? What do we need to do? So this use case here. Multiple applications would serve the same function. So I've seen this time and time again. So imagine an umbrella organization. They've got maybe 5 or 6 organizations kind of underneath them. They all have their own purchasing requirements. They all have their own people who want their own software. So you end up with 5 different types of finance software, maybe all different levels of versions. Maybe they're using them differently. And maybe you only have one IT team that's servicing them all. So you've got to push different patches, or maybe you can't patch a certain date or a time because they have requirements. It just adds all this complexity to your patch management program. Okay, so vulnerability chaining. This is something that hackers know about. This is something that pen testers use every day. Using multiple vulnerabilities in sync to create a more critical attack, to steal those credentials, to get into those systems, and to keep getting into those systems, creating backdoors, all of those things. So why aren't we doing that from the remediation side? Why aren't we looking at vulnerabilities in combination while we're trying to remediate them? That would help us to prioritize things, I think, a little easier. Hacker sophistication is increasing. So when I started on help desk, it was about 12 years ago, I will never forget it. So it was like my first 2 weeks, the director of HR called me, and he was like, man, I'm seeing all these pop-ups on my desk. I don't know what happened. I was like, all right, hold on, I'll be right there. So I get over there, and of course it was just like your typical, clickware, or adware. So unplugged from the network, and I was like, well, what happened? He's like, well, I got this email from Amazon, and it said that my order was delayed, and I had to click on it. Like, well, you didn't have to click on it, but you did. So anyway, sophistication used to be like that, or it didn't used to be as sophisticated. It was just phishing attacks and some pretty harmless adware. Now we've got business email compromise, where they're actually compromising accounts. So the sophistication is constantly increasing for the hackers, so we need to increase that sophistication in our vulnerability management programs. Vulnerability chaining allows attackers to move stealthily throughout the network. They're able to identify and use peripheral weaknesses. And as you'll see, I have a couple of examples that I want to go through. You'll see how low vulnerabilities can actually be exploitable and used in some of these scenarios. Okay. So this is the first one I want to talk about. So this vulnerability came out in 2016. So this is a resource access bypass, which just means that they can get through the network and get access to files and change the security on those files to be able to gain access to files that maybe they shouldn't have had access to. So this was scored as a 4.2, as a low. Exploits are available for it. And one other thing I wanted to mention that I don't know that people always think about, but these CVEs are updated all the time as people get more information, as they find out. Maybe it wasn't exploitable one day, maybe a year from now it is. So these vulnerabilities are updated all the time. So if we're ignoring lows for 4 years, this could be an exploitable vulnerability sitting on your network. So it's important to take a look at those lows and mediums and hopefully remediate some of them. Oh, and I wanted to mention this one was specifically for endpoint software. Okay, so this one, like I said, we're going to talk about Spectre Meltdown a little bit. This was one from 2019, side channel attack, part of Spectre. This was published in 2019. There are exploits available. This one was ranked even lower at a 3.6, even though there are exploits available. So it's just another great example. This is an OS kernel update from 2019. So it's hopefully people have patched it. But if it's a low, maybe they haven't. Okay, so I have 2 chaining examples that I want to talk about. I'm sure anyone who's on a red team probably familiar with at least some of these chained examples. Okay, so for the first one. So you've got a publicly available developer web page. Hopefully you don't, but you might. Maybe you got a dev out there that's like, you know what, I need to use this from home. Maybe I'm going to have this publicly available. Nobody will know. So you've got a cross-site scripting on there. Well, maybe they thought it was only available to one person, but someone got access to it. They were able to use the cross-site scripting. And let's say that so they're able to steal the credentials. They're able to modify the page with the malicious script. So let's say maybe they drop some malware on there, whatever. So the next time that dev goes on there, maybe they have access to your network. I mean, there's a million different ways that they could get in from there. So I think it's important to bring up, like I said, one of these examples here. And this one I really like. So you've got a log in, log out CSRF. I mean, hopefully you don't, but someone did. So the CSRF, you're going to take over the user account. So you make the user log out of the legitimate system, get them to log into the attacker system. So what starts with one user, what starts with a cross-site scripting on one user account actually becomes cross-site scripting across the entire network. And that's a pretty big deal. That's not a good thing. Because then they could just steal the credentials of anyone that they wanted. And in a business email compromise situation, they may be targeting the CEO. They may not actually be interested in anybody else's accounts. They may just want the CEO's account to conduct wire transfers. Okay, so additional complexity. So when we're talking about mediums and lows being exploitable, that's not the only problem. We're also seeing a lot more vulnerabilities classified as criticals and highs. So not only do we have to also worry about mediums and lows, but a lot more vulnerabilities are being classified higher. Recorded Future found that vulnerabilities, and this is just over 1 week, 62% were classified as high, 36% were classified as critical. Now, depending on how complex your network is, that's a big problem. That means if you've got reporting requirements for 30 days to fix things, and you've got 100 new criticals in a month on your system, that's pretty hard to keep up with. So it adds that additional complexity when we're talking about vulnerability remediation and trying to get those mediums and lows fixed. Because if you have more criticals and highs constantly piling up, you may not have time to get to those lows and mediums. Okay, so this is probably my favorite topic. So January 2017, Spectre Meltdown was released. The first patches came out from Windows. But it wasn't just patches. It was also drivers, registry keys. I've been in several environments where I've seen people say, oh yeah, we patched Spectre Meltdown. And then I see 3 or 4 vulnerabilities associated with them because the registry keys weren't added. Or the registry keys were added and they had the wrong setting. So they put a 0 where they were supposed to put a 3. So you didn't actually remediate it. So anyway, I think Spectre Meltdown is really important, mostly because this one is still constantly evolving. But people don't think about it. So I was in an environment, let's see, about a year and a half ago. And so they said, we remediated it, it's not a problem. And I said, well, you didn't fix these registry keys. And they're like, yes, we did. I was like, no, and I can show you didn't. But all of that takes time to show people that, well, no, actually you have to do this setting, you have to do this thing, and this is constantly evolving. So there's new patches released all the time, there's new drivers released all the time, and that's just for this one thing. Of course, it affects the Intel processors. And the important thing is that any of the vulnerabilities associated with this could be classified as a critical, high, medium, or low. So as I showed in one of the previous slides, vulnerabilities associated with this, even though they're exploitable, might be shown as a low. Okay, so adding threat intelligence. I think this is a really important piece to add maturity to your vulnerability management practice because remediation becomes really tough. When you're trying to figure out how should I prioritize things, adding threat intel, knowing who's actually interested in your systems, I think can really help in that remediation process. Because if you just don't even know who's targeting you, if I'm a financial institution versus a local government, different people are going to be targeting me for different information. So really knowing that information, knowing who's actually after you, what tools they have, what malware they might be using, different variants, that's all going to help to mature the vulnerability management program and help you focus on the really important things. And provides action-oriented advice. I think that's a nice term for management when you're trying to get across why it's important to add threat intel into your practices. Using words like this, so like, oh, that sounds good. So I bring up leadership because this is sometimes a hard sell to take to our management and say, I really want to focus on low vulnerabilities. Like, why? Why would you want to do that? I have a really good couple of years ago. So I went to my CIO and I said, listen, we've got the criticals and highs under control. We really need to start focusing our resources on mediums and lows. And he was like, I don't care about mediums and lows. I need to report on criticals and highs. That's what I'm worried about. Okay. Well, a couple weeks later, he said, I want to see the top 10 exploitable vulnerabilities in our environment. No problem. They were all mediums and lows. And he was like, well, we need to fix those. We do. You're right. I mean, I told you that a couple weeks ago, but yes, we do. Absolutely. Yep, let's do that. So I think taking this information and bundling it in a way that our leadership can understand can actually help us to mature the vulnerability management program. So top 10 vulnerable hosts, I found that to be really effective too, especially if they can see like the same 10 workstations over and over again. They're like, why aren't these people plugging their laptops in? I don't know, we should cut them off the network. So it kind of helps give you a case for, hey, these 10 laptops are constantly a problem. Let's get them off the network, or let's reimage them. Let's just completely reimage them. Top 5 vulnerabilities. So top 5s, top 10s, I think those are super actionable because they're little chunks of things. Instead of saying, hey, I've got 400 workstations that we can't reach, and I can't patch them, I can't do this, that. Starting with 10, you can start to really whittle those vulnerabilities down. Top 5 vulnerabilities with most infected hosts. I mean, it just helps to give context to the data that you're giving to leadership and helping them understand what the problem is and why it's a problem. I always say 5-page maximum on PDFs. It really should be like 3 pages. I don't think anybody even really wants to read 5 pages. And then showing vulnerability trends. So actually showing when you're being really effective. So if you can show, hey, we had these top 10 exploitable vulnerabilities in our environment 2 weeks ago, and now those are gone, they're replaced with new vulnerabilities. Well, it's a good thing. It means we remediated the old ones. So showing those vulnerability trends can really help leadership understand kind of what your goals are and that you're actually achieving them. Okay. So final takeaways. Adding threat intelligence, and hopefully I've given you a couple ways that you can fight to add that to your vulnerability management program if you're not doing it already. Prioritizing exploitable vulnerabilities no matter what the score is. Because if you've gotten a good handle on criticals and you're getting there with highs, you can start to make a case to start working on those mediums and then hopefully on those low vulnerabilities. Automate patching. This is a hard thing for leadership to understand sometimes, especially if they've had a bad patch. You've had a bad Microsoft patch or something go out, and leadership is like really scared of automated patching. But if you can show a consistent practice where you can say, listen, we automate these 10 servers to get patched first. Monitor them for a week. If they're good, patch everything else, or maybe not SQL or stuff like your databases, but getting a chance to kind of again, push that patch management program forward so you can just start knocking out vulnerabilities a lot faster. Consider chaining attacks and remediation efforts. I think this is really important for the defender side to just be aware that this can be done, because you can start to look at these, looking at the way that pen testers do the work and start to see how are they getting in? Where are they getting in? Which vulnerabilities are they using to get in? And kind of starting there, and that might help to prioritize your efforts. Training the defenders in the hacker methodologies, again, super important. And oh my gosh, get rid of EOL software. It's so hard. I know it's difficult because I've seen it in so many places, especially Adobe 11, going from Adobe 11 to Adobe DC seemed to be a really, really hard thing to do. But it's so crucial because they're so exploitable usually, and they're the easiest ones to target. Okay, I think I have some time for questions and comments. Yes?
You gave an example where you sort of, here we've addressed a lot of high and critical vulnerabilities. We found some low or medium ones, and we fixed those, but here are more. And I can see, especially since we've only been focusing on high and critical vulnerabilities, that it will seem to someone in a senior leadership position that we're putting all this work in, but they just keep coming. Do you have any thoughts on how to show the value of that effort?
Yes. So,
Can you summarize the question?
yes. So the question was, if you can see, how can you kind of show to leadership that you are mitigating as many vulnerabilities, kind of instead of just showing like, hey, there's new vulnerabilities all the time. So I think it's kind of a two-part thing. If you can show the trend of vulnerabilities trending downward, the ones that you've patched, and also the patches applied. So hopefully your patching software, you have a way to show what we used to do is we would take that chart showing vulnerabilities going down, and then also the number of patches applied per system per month. So that would be, 50,000 patches applied, 100,000 patches applied. And that really, for executive management, was like, oh my gosh, you're applying this many a month? It was like, yeah, that's how many there are. Even if you only have 4,000 endpoints, that's how many patches we're actually applying per month. So giving totals for those, I think, helps. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. Any other questions?
What specifically is exploitable vulnerabilities? Is that the number of hosts with that? What does that mean?
So exploitable means that there is an active exploit out there in the wild. Someone might not actually be using it yet, but it is a known exploit that someone could actually go out and go in using that vulnerability.
Sorry, what I meant was if there are two vulnerabilities, both have exploits, which one is more exploitable? How do you?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So do you mean if they're ranked the same?
Is that what it is, the one that's exploitable with the highest score?
So I would say, okay, so the question was, if you have 2 exploitable vulnerabilities, which one is the most vulnerable? And it depends on your environment, because if I have 2 systems with 2 exploitable vulnerabilities, and this server is, maybe it's a backup server or something, maybe I'm not as worried about it. I'm not going to be as worried about it as this critical server, that's hosting all my business function or my business applications.
When you deliver a report to management, how do you calculate that? The system generates a report, right? So you have to feed all those variables into the system to generate the report. How do you do that?
Right. So I will use the government terminology that I'm familiar with. So high valued assets. So if I have a high valued asset, that is absolutely going to be the thing that I focus on the most. So let's say, like if your SQL database goes down, that could be really bad, especially if it's hosting a application or a public-facing or user application. So I would say, again, it depends on what your environment classifies as a high-valued asset. If we were to lose this data, is our company going under? Okay, well then I'm going to worry about that one first. So again, it's not just is it exploitable, but it's also how is it exploitable? Is it being exploited in the wild? What server is it on? So it's a lot of different factors in there. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So what would you recommend for mitigating risk associated with legacy software and end-of-life stuff that you have to keep around due to mission requirements?
Right. So the question was, how do you handle keeping end-of-life software around when you have to? So network segmentation is a great option if you can segment it away from just everything else, limiting the amount of users that have access to it, and then limiting admin rights to that machine, that application. So trying to keep it as separate as possible from any of the other systems is probably the way I'd go. Okay, sure. Any other questions? Nope, okay, I'm good. Thank you guys very much, I appreciate it.